In this video, we're going to be reviewing the Glock 40 Smith & Wesson in two of the most popular models, the Model 22 and the Model 23. The Glock 40 calibers were first introduced back in 1990, largely to accommodate the new FBI's pistol caliber that they requested, which was the 40 Smith & Wesson Cartridge. Now, looking at the history of this cartridge, it dates back to the 1986 FBI Miami shootout. And afterwards, they had some concerns about the ballistic performance of both the 9mm, as well as replacing their current revolvers that were utilizing the 38 Special Plus P load within a semi-automatic platform. The 38 Special Plus P, of course, is a rimmed cartridge designed for a revolver as opposed to an auto-feed cartridge, which the FBI was looking for. They were happy with the ballistic performance of the 38 Special Plus P, but needed a new auto performance load. So originally, the FBI had chosen the 10mm for their pistols, but the 10mm comes with some drawbacks, especially for police units. One of those is the fact that it is a high pressure load. In fact, it is a higher performance load than the FBI standards even required at the time. And the other part of it is, because it's a larger load, as well as the fact that it's a higher performance load, it typically requires a large frame pistol to be able to fire effectively, as opposed to many of the mid-range pistols that you would typically see on the market today. And this can be a challenge for many people, including people with smaller to medium-sized hands, for their ability to be able to accommodate the larger grip that typically takes place in larger frame on these pistols. For many of these people would have a hard time both controlling accurately and scoring well with a large size pistol in order to fire the 10mm cartridge. So the first change that the FBI made was they originally downloaded the 10mm cartridge by removing some of the powder within the casing, lowering it down to about between 900 and 1,000 feet per second in velocity. What this created, however, was more airspace within the actual cartridge of the 10mm itself. What this did, however, was it opened up a new opportunity for the FBI. By having more airspace, they were then able to cut down the 10mm cartridge into what we now know today as the 40 Smith & Wesson. And the 40 Smith & Wesson, not only were they able to cut it down to manage the desired velocities, but they were also able to now take this new sized cartridge and be able to put it within a medium frame pistol. So no longer were they tethered by 10mm to the larger frame pistols. They can now take the same pistol sizes as their 9mm Glock 17 and 19s and create similar models, same size as in the Glock 22 and the Glock 23 that now support the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge. So in the end, the 40 Smith & Wesson really is a compromise. It's a compromise between the 9mm cartridge as well as the larger cartridges, which is the 10mm, as well as the 45 ACP, which typically require larger frame pistols to accurately fire for most people and efficiently fire. So it is that in-between pistol. It is widely adopted now, the 40 caliber. For decades now, it has literally been tested and utilized by many police forces, both in the United States and worldwide. It is currently now in its fourth generation of models. One of the benefits you have of buying a 40 cal Glock is the fact that you can now support up to 3 different calibers fired out of this pistol. And you can do this by having what are called drop-in barrels or replacement barrels, which can change the loads that you fire out of the 40 caliber pistol. So for example, on this Glock 23, which is a 40 caliber pistol, I can easily disassemble the pistol, remove the 40 caliber barrel, and drop in a replacement barrel, a 357 SIG barrel produced by Lone Wolf. And there's other distributors for this as well. And then load it into the pistol. Now I'm able to fire 357 SIGs out of my Glock 40 pistol. Another benefit of the 357 SIG is it is the same case diameter and almost the exact same cartridge length, so you can use your existing Glock 40 caliber magazines for your 357 SIG loads that you would load in your Glock when you're shooting 357 SIGs. You also have the ability to drop in a 9mm barrel as well and be able to shoot 9mm caliber rounds out of your Glock. However, there's a few differences between the 40 caliber and the 357 SIG when you do this process. Yeah, if I can get the spring right here. Okay, so the difference between the 9mm is the 9mm is going to require a couple different changes. One is, if you're using 9mm rounds, you're going to need to be able to use a comparable magazine from a 9mm pistol. So in this case, a Glock 23 would take a Glock 19 magazine. A Glock 22 would take a Glock 17 magazine. The other thing you need to know is that when you're firing 9mm out of a 40 caliber, the case seat, the extractor, as well as the springs, are designed to be fired with a 40 caliber in mind. So some people will occasionally have extractor problems or extraction problems with the 9mm casings firing it out of a 40 caliber Glock. Now, not everybody does. Some people will, and I'm sure they'll respond to this video claiming, I've never once had a problem dropping a 9mm switch barrel in or and firing it out of the 40 Glock, which is fine. But I have seen situations where it has been a problem occasionally, largely because of these issues that I talked about. Therefore, if from a reliability standpoint alone, I typically recommend that a 40 Smith & Wesson 357 SIGs are perfectly reliable within these platforms. A 9mm, however, I would only recommend the exchange barrel if you're using it for practice shooting or target shooting, not for personal defense. If it's for personal defense and you need a high level of reliability, then I would recommend the dedicated 9mm platforms, and for example, the 17 and the 19, as opposed to the switch out barrels. But you do have three options of what you can shoot out of the 40 caliber, which makes it so diverse in what you can do. Some of the other aspects of a Glock is it's simply a Glock, right? It's a simple design, 34 parts, easy to operate for the average person. There is lots of ammunition currently on the shelf right now for 40 cal. In fact, when you go into many of the larger gun or shooting supply stores, you're going to see a lot of 40 caliber ammunition currently. And there's a reason for this. It's a reason why many of the police are now moving back to the 9mm, which we'll talk about in a moment. And one of the reasons why they're moving back is some of the problems that people claim with the 40 cal is the fact that when you fire the 40 caliber, it is considered to be a snappy round. In other words, you can feel the recoil and the recoil impulse more noticeably than you can with the 9mm. In fact, when I fire them side by side, even I notice the differences between the two. It is a snappy round, and for some people, snappy means uncomfortable. And uncomfortable firing typically leads to flinching, which can impact your accuracy. And one of the ultimate results of that is the snappiness is not always easy for people to fire. And the police performance results when they shoot your pistols have shown this as well. So for example, when the FBI dropped from the 10mm to the 40 Smith & Wesson, they did so to improve their performance scores of their duty officers. But what we're also noticing, and a lot of police agencies have noticed as well, when they do a comparison between the scores produced with the 9mm as opposed to the 40 Smith & Wesson, the scores are actually, on average, superior for the 9mm over the 40 Smith & Wesson as well. So a lot of police are now making that question as to whether or not they want to move back to the 9mm as opposed to staying with the 40 Smith & Wesson. So the other thing about it is just simply a Glock. And if you've never fired a Glock before, you'll notice that there's a hump on the back of the pistol. And some people like it and many don't. In fact, it gives you somewhat of a natural higher sight target. And if you, for example, didn't have the hump on your pistol. So there's just some ergonomics as well that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, as far as caliber and capacity, being a 40 Smith & Wesson, it is a little bit larger diameter than the 9mm. Therefore, the magazines hold 2 less rounds than the 17 and 19 respectively. So the Glock 22 can hold up to 15 rounds. The 23 can hold 13 rounds. Again, 2 less than the 17 and 19 respectively. The 40 caliber, however, One of the benefits of the pistol cartridge is, much like the 9mm and much like the 10mm, it is a high pressure cartridge. The pressure standards can go up to 35,000 pounds per square inch. So when you look at some of the ballistics of the higher performing caliber loads that you can fire out of the 40 Smith & Wesson, for example, Underwood makes a load that comes out, it's a 155 grain load that comes out at 1,300 feet per second, producing almost 582 foot-pounds of energy, which is huge. It's a significant amount of energy, certainly more than a traditional 9mm. Even their 180 grain loads come in at 1,100 feet per second, producing 484 foot-pounds on average of energy into the target. Now compare that, for example, to the 9mm, now of which many people are firing the Plus P cartridges. Typically can fire now up to 1,250 feet per second, producing about 413 foot-pounds of energy out of a 124 grain 9mm bullet. And then of course you can take the final comparison, which is the 10mm. When fully charged and loaded, 150 grain 10mm load can go up to 1,500 feet per second at 750 foot-pounds of energy. So clearly the 10mm provides a lot of energy as well as velocity for a very heavy projectile to be fired out of them. But as you can see, the 40 Smith & Wesson really is an in-between. It's a compromise between those cartridges ballistically when you're firing the load. Now, as far as action, it is a typical striker fired, so you only have one action, which is you just pull the trigger, it cycles itself, and then you let go to make safe, as opposed to single double actions, which had more functions, which clearly is why the striker fired pistols have become so popular. Ergonomics and weight. As far as weight of the pistol, of the Glock 22 unloaded, comes in around 1 pound and 7 ounces compared to, for example, the Glock 17, which comes in at 1 pound 6.5 ounces. So just slightly heavier in weight, but nothing noticeable. On the Glock 23, however, comes in at about 1 pound 5.5 ounces, as opposed to the Glock 19, which comes in at 1 pound 5 ounces. So again, weight is pretty similar between the 40 caliber as well as the on the mid-size, as well as the 9mm. That also goes into another topic having to do with the snappiness of the pistol, again, which is the size of the 17 and 22 is identical, so you can use the same holsters and the same type of support configuration. Same thing with the 19. However, the weight being equal as well, you have less physical mass, less weight to counteract the physics of the increased velocity you're getting out of the pistol, which is part of the reason why you see people commonly talk about how the 40 caliber is much more uncomfortable to shoot size for size comparison wise with the 9mm pistols that are out there today. As far as the barrel, it is a typical Glock polygonal hexagonal rifling barrel. You would see in all their other ones. Again, takedown and cleaning is very easy, like I showed you with the swap out of the barrel. Very simple to take down, clean, just excellent in that regard, very simple. As far as options on your Glocks, some of the things I like to do, first thing I almost always change out are the sights. I usually like to put in Trijicom or some other better sighting system into the pistol, despite the plastic sights, which I just don't typically like from a reliability standpoint on the pistol. You'll also see that I put a lot of extended slide releases on my Glocks as well, which allows me in one hand to easily charge the weapon and release the slide. Very simple, quick change out. And then there's the grip job. So one of the things you're going to notice on the table here is I've got a couple different grip job options compared to the standard Glock. So the first one is out of a company called Robar here in Arizona. And what they did is they actually removed the hump. So this is more of a 1911 style sloping grip. And then they did their light stippling on here as well. So the feel of this is excellent. If you like the feel of the 1911 and you don't like the feel of the hump, these are really great options for you. It does take time and it costs money for people to do this for you. These are good options as far as customizing the grip on your Glock. The other option is, if you want to take the quicker, less expensive route, is the Glock $4 grip job, as you see here in a lot of ones that I fire here. I have a video on this, so if you want to watch the Glock $4 grip job, it's another way to kind of even out the hump and give yourself much more comfortable firing hold onto the pistol as a result of this as well. So as far as accuracy, it's a typical Glock. I mean, if you look at my targets for my Glock 22 at 30 and 50 feet, and then moving out to 70 feet and then one-handed, again, not much difference. Same thing with the Glock 23 at 30 feet compared to the Glock 22. Again, not much difference at all. Moving out with the 23 out to 70 feet and then one-handed, again, not much difference at all. And these groups are pretty similar to the groups I achieve out of my Glock 17 as well. So they're no less or more accurate with the 40 caliber. The only noticeable difference, however, is because it is a snappy round, it takes more time to rapid fire and get back on target with the 40, which I've noticed when I fire it. But the inherent accuracy is the same, but the recovery from the recoil is something that is different. And again, each individual is going to have to manage that on their own. As far as alternatives, of course, if you don't want the Glock 40, you can go back down to the 9mm. A lot of police departments are now doing this, reverting back to the 17 and the 19, largely because the ballistics now of the 19 have improved so much. Basically what's happening at this point is a lot of the bullet technology is getting so much better that you have frangible and hollow point bullets. And what this allows you to do is, instead of shooting through the target where some of the energy goes through and then out, now allows the bullet to expand and dump more of the energy into the target when it hits. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are looking back at the 9mm and with these new loads that they have out here today and trying to figure out, okay, the ballistics clearly are not as strong as the 40 caliber or the 40 Smith & Wesson. However, they're not exactly inferior anymore either. And if we have police departments that are shooting more accurately, consistently with the 9mm over the 40 caliber, it goes back to the old argument of what's more important, the ballistics or the accuracy. Because shot placement is so critical that if you can't even hit a good ballistic round onto a target, it's not going to matter what the performance of that round will do if it doesn't hit the right place. So a lot of people now, especially the police departments and the military, are looking back at the 9mm and figuring out, okay, is it worth giving up a little bit ballistically and energy-wise to go back to the 9mm with the right types of ammunition to get better accuracy and better shot placement, as opposed to staying with the 40 caliber and having lower scores and lower shot placement relative to the 9mm. So these are one of the reasons why a lot of people now are moving back to the 9mm platform, and a lot of police departments are moving out of the 40 calibers and back into the 9mm and other types of calibers that are out there today. As far as alternatives, as I talked about earlier, they have the 9mm platforms. Almost all the major gun makers now that make striker fires and semi-automatics are offering 40 calibers. However, at the time of filming, we're seeing less and less of that. 10 years ago, it seemed like everybody would come out with their 9mm and then their 40 caliber and then their 45. Now we're seeing some manufacturers that are going straight from the 9mm to the 45 and skipping the 40 calibers altogether. So that's a kind of a sign of the times, one of the trends that we're seeing, and one of the reasons why you're going to probably see a lot of 40 cal, at least right now, sitting on the shelf, because fewer and fewer people are buying these pistols as opposed to the 9mm and other options that are on the market today. So what are these good for? Clearly it's an effective law enforcement pistol, as well as good for protection against two-legged predators, no question about it. If you can handle the recoil, can recover from it well, and shoot as good as the 9mm, then it might be a very good option for you. The benefit about the Glock is simply that you have the interchangeability of multiple calibers out of one pistol. So if it is important to you to be able to shoot 357 SIGs and occasionally shoot 9mm for target out of one pistol, this might actually be a good option for you, especially if you do like the 40 caliber to begin with. It is a Glock, it's high quality, there's the simplicity and of the pistol is excellent. It's what makes it so well made and very affordable. They tend to hold their value as well, and reliable, and they're universally used. They've been used for police departments now really since the early 1990s and have proven themselves worthy. So you just have to ask yourself at this point whether a 40 caliber is what you want, and hopefully the reasons that we talked about in the video today will help you explain and understand the differences between the calibers, how they ended up with the 40 caliber, and where things are actually moving now relative to where the 40 caliber is. Some people would argue at the time that this was filmed that the 40 caliber is actually now in decline, with a lot of people moving over to the 9mm in the police departments. But remember, the police forces also have a lot of people with different hand sizes and shooting experiences that they need to accommodate on a standard platform. That might not be you. This might actually be a better platform for you as opposed to these other types of options. But again, that's up to you. Hopefully this video helped answer that question for you and determine whether or not the Glock 40 caliber is a good or not a good option for you. And if you like this video or you like our channel, please subscribe to us on YouTube, and thanks for watching.